Yo guys, it's JJ here, and today I'm going to be walking you through a hard ethnic beat just for future. But before we get into the video, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. We have just passed 1.5k subs. Actually, we have just passed 1.6k subs. Really hyped, I can't even lie, almost to 2k. Really appreciate all the support. And guys, to show some love back, in the description I've got a bunch of free drum kits for you. And to grab my latest one, the Essential Drum Kit, which will be used in this video, go check it out on my Instagram. Link is in the description as well. And let's just get into this. So, first thing to know about this beat, we are doing it at 164 BPM, and we're starting off in a scale of C minor. This just changed later on, but the main component of this beat is going to be a nice sound, a Koto sound to be specific, coming from the Ethno World 6 Bank in Kontakt 7. But if you guys don't have Kontakt 7, I completely understand. I was broke as well at some point, and you can go use Expand 2, Reddit, one-shot sounds. Like, there's loads of other ways you guys can get these kind of sounds as well, so don't worry. As for the pattern, it's actually pretty simple looking at it. Very repetitive, which is what we want for these dark ethnic beats just for future. But just to break it down, we did this in a nice little, like, you know, C, G sharp, G, back into a C, and we literally just repeat this pattern over and over. And then for a bit of variation, we just add this nice little G sharp at the end, and then this one bar gets repeated for a full 8. And to point this out as well, as you guys can see, these notes are a semitone apart within a scale. All it means is that it's dark, it provides tension, it sounds dope for future, so use it. Then another thing I did was click Alt R to pull up this randomizer, and then all I did was play with the velocity knob, as you can see, and what it just gives is a bit more of a human touch to the sound. And without further ado, this is what the main melody for future sounds like. As for the effects, the first thing I did was get myself an EQ, cutting off all my lows, and then ducking some harsher high frequencies. Next up, I got an instance of RC20 using the Vinyl 1 preset, and the only change I really did was just change the noise because it was a bit too loud. Then I got myself an instance of a Fruity Phaser, default preset, but as you guys can see in the mixer track, I did it at 50%, just so it doesn't really overpower that melody. And last but not least, we got ourselves an instance of Valhalla Vintage Verb, and I did this just so it's a bit more ambient, gives a bit more of a wet sound, if that makes sense. And coming to a rap, I stereo separated the melody around 20% just to widen it within the headphones, making it a bit more, you know, grand. And for the next sound, guys, we are using an instance of Expand 2 with a preset called the Producer Brass, which comes from the Brass and Woodwind section. And the reason I am using this brass is because you have a really nice Koto melody going on, so the brass just adds a bit of bass to the whole thing. And all I did was just play the root note of C in 2 different octaves, which is the C3 and C4, and I copy and pasted for the second 4 bar. But I left all the space in between here and here, and the reason I did that, it just gives it a bit more space, it doesn't take up too much of the frequency range, and it gives it a bit more tension because it's just coming in and out like a nice little, like, stab, but not a stab that just lasts the whole way. Anyways though, this is what the brass sounds like. For the effects, I kept it quite simple. Just started off with an EQ, cutting off all my lows. Then to Valhalla Vintage Verb, but as you can see by the preset I made, it's a bit more of a low reverb here because we don't want the brass to get drowned out. But for stereo separation, I actually did it 100%, making it super wide within your headphones, just because I want the sound to really just back up the Koto. I don't want it to overpower it because brasses are quite overpowering, so that's another method you can use. And next up, guys, to add to the whole ethnic vibe, we got ourselves Kontakt 7 again, with Ethno World 6 voices again, and I'm using a preset called the Bali Gamalian Voice 97 TM Sync. You know what that means, we're using a vocal run. And as you can see, very simple pattern. Play the vocal run here, repeat it again, but then halfway through on that last little 8 bar, I change it because it just, you know, sounds higher pitched, a bit more like aggressive for that whole ethnic dark vibe. But as I said with the Koto as well, if you don't have Kontakt 7, you can definitely get vocal runs on Looperman. You can find it on Reddit, you can just go on YouTube even, like, the options are really endless, so don't feel like you're limited if you don't have these plugins. And with that being said, this is what the vocal run sounds like for the ethnic sample. And there you'll have it. And as you can hear from that little last section, that higher pitch kind of sound, icing on that cake. So to really get the most out of these vocals, first thing I always do with pretty much all the vocals I use on my beats, I got an EQ and applied something that I call a telephone EQ, which just means you're cutting off a crazy amount of highs and lows, giving it kind of like a telephone sound, you know, like them really old telephones, you know, we're talking about Nokia brick era here, so that kind of sound. Then a bit of shaper box to get the vocal panning left to right, add a bit more movement to the sample instead of keeping it all stale. And last but not least, a heavy amount of Valhalla vintage verb. Really want to drown that vocal out, make it wet, super in the background, but kind of gives that hard, kind of spooky atmosphere to the whole thing. And last but not least, to provide that extra, you know, background sound, I stereo separated it around 70% just to really widen it out and again not be in the forefront of the whole sample. And next up, I got myself an instance of Analog Lab 5 using the source based preset, which comes from the Artillery Bank. What? And if you don't know this, I pretty much rinse the space. I absolutely abuse it because I use it in all my beats. It comes from the Artillery Bank, which is made by Max Future and his friend Easy A. Both dope producers. We all know them because, let's be real, who doesn't know them? And let me just show y'all what I did. Looking at the pattern, very simple. Again, all I really do is just play the notes over and over. But then at the end of the 4 bars, I just cut it off here, providing a bit of tension, a bit more of like a dark atmosphere. Because when you cut these notes off on your bass, sometimes it just provides tension by just completely removing the sound. And this is what the bass sounds like. And last but not least, to wrap the whole sample up, I am using a preset from a band called Balkan Ethnic Orchestra, and the preset is called Duduk Alto. I probably butchered it, but who cares? Of course, you can use any flute that you want, but this is just the flute preset that I use. And looking at the pattern again, it is very simple and repetitive. I am essentially using the same notes as when I played the Koto, which is that C, G, and G sharp. And all I do is play like this stuttering pattern, as you can see, just skipping a few notes in between every time, and it just gives it a nice little bounce, I can't lie. Pretty dope counter melody. And last but not least again, clicking Alt-R to pull up my randomizer and play with the velocity knob just to make it sound a bit more human because, you know, we can't have a really robotic sound and no one really likes that either. For the effects, pretty straightforward again. Get myself an EQ, cut off all my unwanted lows, get some Valhalla vintage verb, and add a bit of reverb, a bit of ambience. Then stereo separate the sound around 35%. And then, last but not least, before I play the sample, I got myself an instance of sound shifter, taking the whole sample up 2 semitones, meaning we are now working in a scale of D minor. And then, as you see, I rendered the whole sample out, apart from the bass. I kept it separate, as you can see, and then just take it up 2 semitones instead, because whenever you render a bass out, it just sounds really weird, so I always just do it manually and play the pattern. But without further ado, this is what an ethnic sample for Future sounds like. And now guys, we're moving on to the drums. Just remember, all these sounds are from my kit, the Essential Kit, found on my Instagram below, all for free, so let's just continue with it. First thing to note, we have got ourselves a Lex Nougat snare from the kit, and all I did was just play a very, very simple pattern that we all know and love. But in terms of variation, if we just look at these 2 notes, I added them in for a bit of extra bounce at the end of every 8 bar. And guys, now we're moving on to the hi-hats. But the first thing to note is this is just a 4 bar looped over again to make an 8. And another thing to note, if we click the magnet tool, go into a 6 step, and then we just look at the rolls, everything was done under like 6 step, 1/3 step kind of stuff, you know, in your triplet rolls. Those were really, really good for these ethnic beats, and it just gives it a bit of a different vibe. I don't know what it is, but the rolls just hit a bit different. But to break it down, if we look at this 4 bar here, first of all, I start with a 6 step roll, take this note down, then do a 3rd step roll. Just sounds really hard. Whenever you do rolls like this, where it's like a note and then another roll next to it at a lower pitch, icing on the cake. Then got ourselves a normal simple roll going on here, then another 3rd step roll, then another 6 step roll. But the way I did this is if you click your paintbrush tool up here, then whenever you draw a note, and as you can see, you draw your roll. But if you click shift and draw the roll, it places the notes wherever you want. So that's how I get these kind of little cool rolls going on down here. Then here, again, another 6 step roll, and then a pretty crazy, I think it was like a 1/3 beat roll or like a 6 beat roll here. Pretty nice. As you can see, I'm doing that same technique as I just did here, but just with a different type of roll. Again, they're really, really hard, these rolls. I don't know why, but just do it. Then played with the pitch, as you can see with these notes. Got a 6 step roll, a 3rd step roll again, and then this one is purely a 3rd beat roll. So if you click the magnet tool, go into a 3rd beat, man, these are some of my favorite rolls. They just go super hard, and you'll hear it just in a second. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So this is what the hi-hat and the snare sound like. And now guys, we are onto our 808s. But looking at the pattern, it is very, very simple. And the reason it's that simple is because the hi-hats already go hard. The sample's pretty crazy, so gotta chill out a bit in the drum somewhere, which is why I left my 808s quite simple. But breaking it down, this pattern and this pattern are pretty much the same. So, you know, copy and pasted it, except this note came in, and copy and pasted again as before. And same with this pattern, except this is just an octave higher, as you could see. Then for variation, I added this extra note and this one down here. But we already know there was no change in root note, but again, the A just sounds really hard, so added it in. And then looking at the kicks, the pattern is essentially the same, just kept at that root note of C. And guys, one thing I do for my 808s and my kicks, which I really like to emphasize on every video, is if you click Control A, highlighting all the notes, grab your mouse, hold that scroller wheel down, as you can see, and push it all the way to the top. It maxes your velocities out. And the reason I stress on this every single time is it makes your 808s punchier, same goes to your kick, and it's really appealing to artists that you're trying to land placements with. And with all that being said, this is what the 808 and the kick sound like for a hard future ethnic beat. And last but not least, within the drums, all we got ourselves is a nice open hat. Repeats every 2 bars, you could see, and it literally hits where the 808 and the kick hit, because layering these sounds just gives a nice little extra punch and adds that whole hard future beat vibe. So that's all I did. And now, without further ado, this is what an ethnic beat sounds like for Future. But now to break down the structure of my beat, it is pretty simple, to be honest with you guys. And to break it down, I got myself a nice little like wind sample for my Essentials kit, adding a bit more of that ethnic vibe to the whole sample. Then got myself the bass line, the vocals, and that main koto playing just for the intro. And once the beat drops, we introduce that nice hard-hitting horn alongside all my essential drums, which is that kick, 808, snare, and hi-hat. Then for the second half of this hook, we have got ourselves the vocals kicking in again, just to really drive it home alongside with that open hat, really just making this hard. Then we move on to our verse, which composes of 3 8 bars. And to break down the first verse, we have got ourselves the main koto playing with all the essential drums, just keeping it simple. But then I introduced the flute now with some variation in the second verse alongside that bass line, which means I've taken away my 808 and I've now introduced that open hat again, just to really add some more hard-hitting emphasis. And last but not least, the final 8 bar within the verse is known as a pre-hook, and that's because it's that 8 bar before the hook, so you know, it kind of comes in the name. But I'll reintroduce that nice little wind sample, play that bass line, introduce those vocals, that brass in the main sample still, stripping away all the drums to really put an emphasis on, like, you know, this is the part before the hook, so we're building into it. Then I copy and paste the hook, I copy and paste the verse, and I copy and paste the hook yet again. And guys, there we have it, how to make a hard ethnic beat for Future. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.